Hey, welcome back to the third Saturday in October, your SEC tailgating podcast for the rest of us. I am Alabama Chris, your correspondent for the West, and going through SEC Media Days. We're starting today in alphabetical order, although it's the number one in my heart as well. Alabama Crimson Tide coming off a 13-0 national championship season. Very excited about Media Days. Also my favorite team in the world, so I'm very excited about it as well, but it's alphabetical order, and so we're starting at the top of the West, the top of the nation, the top of my heart, Alabama Crimson Tide with Nick Saban. Also had John Metchie coming in, one of our wide receivers, to talk to the press, as well as Phil Mathis, one of our defensive linemen, talking. Got to go ahead and give it out right now. Got the suit game going on. Metchie, suit game, gets a 9. Looked great, looked sharp up there. Mathis also, I'm giving him a 7. He was looking sharp as well. But Metchie, man, he may get the top for the whole Media Days. Nick Saban, though, I've seen him look a little sharper in that suit. He looked a little 1992 Gene Stallings-esque with that light gray suit with the color tie. But I'll give him a 5 or a 6 there on that one. Also, for Coach Speak, he spoke almost 10 minutes out of about 30 minutes that he was allotted. And so Coach Speak, I'll give him a good 6 on that. You know, Coach Saban has his own way of speaking, so it's almost like there's Coach Saban speak, and then there's Coach Speak, and then there's just normal speak. And we kind of look at Saban, and we like to laugh a lot throughout the season because he'll give some grumpy answer, and we always love that about Saban, but he's got his own style of speaking. He did do some typical Coach Speak, some filibustering in there, talking about how COVID was difficult, where, you know, even coming off a national championship season, he talks about how that Alabama is in a rebuilding season just because of all the pieces that they've lost. And that goes to one of the first points that I wanted to make with Nick Saban talking, is he was talking about how you have to make sure that you are developing your student athletes well. He was asked for the key to longevity, and he said, essentially, win. That's what you have to do. You have to win, and in order to win, you have to have a culture and a mindset that's going to be winning. So you have to develop those people. But he did give some commendation to the SEC for how they handled COVID last year, and I appreciated that, him just kind of looking at the situation that was difficult last year and just giving props to the SEC on how they handled it. I thought that was a good way that he handled that. Also, somebody asked him about NIL deals, name, image, and likeness deals that are coming up, and specifically Alabama's quarterback Bryce Young, who Nick Saban mentioned during Media Days that Bryce Young at that point, it could be over this as well, but he was nearing $1 million in deals already with the new NIL, and he essentially hasn't even played it down for us, or he hasn't started for Alabama yet. So that's kind of interesting. But I appreciated what Nick said, or Coach Saban said during that. He was saying that, you know, back in the day, a lot of players, especially when you're in college, were expected to work. So it didn't matter if you were just a student or you were a student athlete, you were expected to work when you went to school. And so he had a job as well as playing football. And he said that the NIL just gives the students a new way of working, or it returns the ability for student athletes to work, to earn something. And I appreciated this because thinking about it through that idea of just allowing students to have a way to make money, you know, if you weren't a student athlete, you could basically have any kind of job and it wouldn't make that big of a deal. But specifically on how student athletes in college are not allowed to, or at least until recently, to benefit or to profit off of their name, image, and likeness. But now they have that opportunity. And so maybe it's less working at that gas station like Nick Saban did back in the day, and more now being able to, you know, be a mattress spokesperson or a local car dealership spokesperson or a Nike spokesperson, whatever it may be. You can now make a living or make some money off of that to kind of offset a lot of those collegiate costs. And I appreciated the way that was there. Nick Saban was also asked about how his strength and conditioning program was coming along with the 2 hires that we had last year to Alabama. And he said that, you know, they have done a lot of things with data that they can allow now to look at specific data with GPS systems that each player is using throughout the practice. They can look at that data, so they then don't have to have a full practice and then line everybody up for sprints, line everybody up for let's see how much you can compete on these levels, because they can go dive into that data when they are looking at just their normal movement around practice. And so by doing so, they can still get the same amount of information, but they don't have to work the players out as hard. And I really appreciate that as well. Let's use technology to our benefit for all of these teams. I'd love for all of these teams to be utilizing it, and we do. This is 2021. We're in the SEC. Specifically, I focus on the SEC West, the whole of the SEC, but in particular, the teams that I'll be talking about over the next couple of days. They really utilize and go into detail about all of these, the small amount of information that you can get out. They can give you a lot of details as to how a player is playing or what to do to refocus. I really love how we're using technology these days. And so I know that we're going to continue pushing forward into the future. But the future is something that Nick Saban did talk about. He said, you know what, I'm standing up here and a lot of these new questions that may be coming at me today, whether they're talking about the expanded playoffs or the name, image, and likeness, the NIL situation, and even some of the endorsements, if that's a good thing or a bad thing, or what players will be playing at the start of the season. He said, you know what, a lot of us, we get up here as coaches and we talk to you, but we know that when we talk, a lot of what we're going to say is going to be wrong. Just because there's not a lot with an expanded playoff, we don't know what the outcomes will be. So asking a coach what their thoughts are just those opinions, thoughts that are their own. But as far as extrapolating that data to see what the future looks like, it's hard to tell because they're in the trenches too. They are dealing with these years as they come along and each new cycle of students that are coming through and trying to build a new team each year. So it's hard to know what the future will hold. And I know that as a reporter, if I was in that audience asking some of these coaches questions, I would be tempted to ask Coach Saban about NIL or expanded playoffs because those are hot button topics. And around the time of the SEC Media Days, it popped up that Oklahoma and Texas may be leaving their respective conference to join the SEC. And to Saban's point, we don't know about what all these details will look like because the coaches often are guessing, educated guessing, but guessing nonetheless with some of these questions that are asked. So I love that he had kind of said, hold everything that we all say, all these coaches and all the players that get up from every team with a grain of salt, because there's a lot of information that needs to be mulled through to come up with those opinions there. So overall, though, I really appreciated Coach. He even had a story to start off his talk on that 10-minute kind of filibustering that all the coaches have to do to some degree or another. And some have an artistry about it, and we'll go into that more on other episodes or other videos here. But to have it 10 minutes of a buffer, the filibustering, like Coach Saban did, he had a lot of information. I'm assuming he kind of wears the mantle of I'm the figurehead. Greg Sankey's definitely the commissioner, but when people think of the SEC, the first name that often people think of is Coach Saban. And I'm saying this as an Alabama fan, but also trying to be fair of just that as when Alabama is on top, they look there. A couple of years ago, they really wanted to hear from Ed Orgeron after that amazing 2019 season that LSU had with Joe Burrow behind center. And so there's a lot of storylines that come into it. But Saban seems to have, I guess this is probably his 14th SEC Media Days as the Alabama head coach, his 18th overall, because again, I think for 4 of those years, 2000 to 2004-ish, LSU's head coach and was there then. So I think that they said that this is Coach Saban's 18th visit to SEC Media Days. But the one interesting story that he had was that his boxer dog, Lizzie, several years back, he and Miss Terry came to the hotel there in Hoover where they were having media days and were staying up on the 7th floor. Miss Terry went for a shopping excursion, left the dog in the room, and the dog somehow made it outside of the room all the way downstairs to the lobby where they're having all of these press conferences and ended up finding Coach Saban and sitting in his lap. So I thought that was an interesting story. They brought a dog along to Media Days, and it somehow, out of all of those people, all of those rooms, all of those stories there where they have SEC Media Days there in Hoover at the Birmingham Galleria, that dog made it all the way from their room to his lap. Interesting. So I'll leave it to you there. That was one of the high points for me from SEC Media Days from Coach Saban. Again, for me, as a Bama fan, as an SEC fan, the season for me in the SEC starts at Media Days. But really, for me, because I kind of expect Coach Saban to come in with a specific through line to his speech, which is essentially everything I'm going to say here is going to be, it quite possibly could be wrong. And we got to continue to develop players and focus on the priority, which is the student athlete. Make sure they're ready physically, mentally, emotionally, and now financially as we're going into this NIL deal. So he kind of towed the line there. So I'm excited now that SEC Media Days are behind us to look forward to fall camp that's starting here in a couple of weeks. That's really when it makes sense to me to start hearing what Coach Saban is saying, because they're taking real data from those training days, from those practices, and then talking to the media versus talking about a lot of possibilities, talking a lot about last season and the greatness that was that season, national championship. But then looking forward, it's hard to say. Who knows who will be behind center, because everything that happens between now here in July to fall football starting September 4th for Alabama, there's a lot that can happen. So keep it there with a grain of salt, but really looking forward to practices starting here in a couple weeks. And so for third Saturday in October, this is Alabama Chris signing out. Remember, roll balls, baby.